I never imagined a single envelope could unravel everything I thought I knew about my life. It was sitting on the kitchen counter when I got home from work, plain and unassuming, but the words inside hit me harder than any scream ever could. Notice of eviction. My name wasn't on the deed. Not really. Occupant. The letter called me, as if I were a stranger in my own home. I remember the smell of burnt toast lingering from breakfast that morning, the ticking clock suddenly deafening, and the tremor in my hands as I held that paper. Everything I had trusted, our marriage, our home, my safe little world, was suddenly unsteady. For 22 years, I believed Daniel and I had a solid marriage. He was charming in a quiet way, never loud, always attentive. We built our home together, a modest two-story with cream siding, maple trees in the yard, walls I had painted myself, rugs that held years of laughter, tears, and birthdays. I worked my steady 9 to 5. He worked long hours in logistics. Our lives weren't perfect, but they were ours. I never questioned the little habits, the small white lies, because I believed the foundation was strong. He handled the paperwork when we bought the house, confidently assuring me, "Trust me, I've got us." And I did, until that envelope told me otherwise. It didn't start with shouting or confessions. It started with subtle clues, like shadows in a familiar place. Daniel became secretive with his phone, stepping outside to answer calls. Strange receipts appeared, small loans and transactions he claimed were work-related. I wanted to ignore them, to tell myself I was overthinking, but a pit in my stomach grew, a quiet warning that something was off. I noticed cologne I didn't recognize, an unfamiliar perfume scent lingering on his coat. I told myself it was nothing, but deep down I felt the slow, creeping unease of someone realizing the foundation of their world might be hollow. Then the truth hit like a brick. One rainy evening, I found a folder tucked behind his office papers. Inside were documents I had no right to see but could not ignore. Hidden loans, bank statements, and photos of another family, a woman I'd never met, a child with his eyes, his smile. Years of secrets, carefully buried, lay bare. My hands shook as I confronted him, voice barely above a whisper. "Who are they?" He looked at me, for the first time without the familiar warmth, and finally spoke. A second family, a life I didn't know existed, and the house that I thought was mine legally. It was his, entirely in his name, tied up in loans I had no part in. My home, my life, everything I thought was safe, evaporated in that moment. I spent days in stunned silence, pacing the rooms that had once felt like a sanctuary. My grief was layered, betrayal, disbelief, and a crushing sense of loss. But I couldn't stay frozen. I began calling lawyers, asking questions, exploring what options I had. Daniel offered no real explanation, no apology that felt genuine. The eviction notice loomed over us like a shadow, reminding me that action was necessary. I had to reclaim my dignity, if not the house, if not my marriage. The community, once close-knit, soon learned the truth. Friends whispered, neighbors stared, and some family members expressed shock I hadn't seen before. Daniel's second family became public knowledge, and suddenly the secret that he had guarded so jealously became common knowledge. I felt a strange mixture of shame and relief. Shame for being blindsided, relief that I was no longer the only one carrying the weight of the lies. Social consequences fell on him naturally. His duplicity could not hide behind polite smiles anymore. And in that exposure, I found a flicker of justice. Losing my home was devastating, but it became the beginning of rebuilding. I found a small apartment nearby, painted its walls a soft cream, hung pictures that made me smile. I started walking again in the evenings, the maple leaves crunching underfoot, remembering that life can still have beauty even after betrayal. I enrolled in a creative writing class, something I had abandoned years ago, and discovered a voice that had been quieted for too long. I began teaching my niece piano lessons, hosting small dinners for friends, learning to laugh and trust in small doses again. Every box I unpacked, every meal I cooked, every quiet evening with a cup of tea reminded me that I could create a home within myself, one that no one could take. I often sit on the small balcony, watching the sun set behind the buildings, and reflect on what I learned. Trust is precious, but so is self-respect. People can deceive, homes can be lost, but inner strength cannot. I forgave Daniel, not for him, but for me, and I learned that forgiveness doesn't mean returning to what was. It means stepping forward without carrying the burden of anger like a stone in your chest. Would you have stayed silent, or would you have acted the way I did? Sometimes life shatters us to show us what we're truly made of. If my story resonates with you, I hope you share your own moments of rebuilding and strength in the comments. And remember to subscribe for more real-life stories that remind us how resilience can bloom from the hardest betrayals.